Welcome to the Buick Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Sheldon Marion, and on this podcast, we dive deep into the outdoors. We discuss hunting and fishing techniques, give you tips and tricks, tell stories, and everything in between to help you enjoy the outdoors. This podcast is brought to you by Northbound Gear. If you've been around here for a while, you have seen that I pretty well exclusively wear Northbound Gear pants, whether it's the adventure, water resistant, and cut resistant pants, or the waterproof jeans. They're just excellent stand up gear. They have those pants. They also have some summer pants as well that zip off into shorts. They have jackets, things for men and women, and they also have a bunch of accessories as well. If you want to check those guys out, they're at northboundgear.co. And for you guys listening and watching this, if you use the promo code Sheldon15 at checkout, you'll receive 15% off your order, and that's including the sale items. Also, with Northbound Gear, they partner up with One Tree Planted, so for every purchase, you also plant a tree. So head over to northboundgear.co, check those guys out, use the promo code Sheldon15 to receive 15% off, and get yourself some good gear. Alrighty. Well, let's sit down and have ourselves another conversation, hey? Well, welcome back to another Buick Outdoors podcast. If you're new around here, my name is Sheldon Marion, and I'm your host. So today we're gonna be sitting down. We're gonna be discussing kind of the chicken season here this year so far. I know for the most part around at least all of northern BC and northern Alberta, for whatever reason, our grouse are just. It almost seems like they're just not here this year. And chickens. They're a lot like rabbits, where they do go through their own little cycles and stuff. But for this year, it's just strange how the cycle isn't working the way that it kind of typically does. And I have to say this quite often when I'm doing my little podcast here and stuff. I'm not an actual biologist whatsoever. I'm just a guy that does a lot of hunting, and I take notes of things, and I'm very mindful of what's going on, kind of thing, for the most part. Anyways, I'm just like any other guy out there. I'm wrong just as much as I am right, kind of a thing. Sometimes I'm wrong more often than I am right. So what I say, you gotta kind of take it with a little grain of salt. But with the grouse, it's not just like the rough grouse either. This year it seems like it's the rough grouse and the spruce grouse, and I don't think I've even seen a dusky or a sharptail this year. And that's also because of where I'm living right now too. We don't get nearly as many over here as what I used to get over out by Buick area. There's quite a few sharptail over there. But usually what happens with grouse is you kind of have to go back to the previous year and see how they kind of finished off the year and how they went into the winter. So for last fall, there was grouse all over the place. It was nothing for me to go out and shoot 5 or 10 chickens in an afternoon, sometimes evening hunt kind of a thing. And then going into the winter, I gotta say we've had one of the best winters in many, many, many years. Going into winter, there wasn't a lot of rain. There wasn't any real big heat domes come through. We didn't get early snowfall. We didn't get those typical wet, cold winters. We didn't get any of our usual Chinooks. Even the temperature itself. Come January, I was still going out on the ice, on the lakes with my axe and hitting the ice to make sure that the ice was thick enough that I could walk on. So we didn't get really overly too cold. In February, we did. But even in February, we had one, maybe 2 Chinooks that kind of came through. But I mean, that's normally what we get on a typical year anyways. And we didn't have those weird rainfalls in February. Well, I guess we kind of did a little bit in January and February, and then come March we were starting to warm up. Anyways, uh, about the only thing that might have done a little bit of damage is actually we didn't get enough snow, I don't think. Because the way the snow works for the grouse is that it gives them something to kind of burrow into, and it really isolates them, and it kind of like insulates them and keeps them warm and all that stuff. And it keeps the owls and the weasels and the marten uh, somewhat at bay at getting them. But even without that, uh, this spring there were still a lot of chickens running around. And when it comes to this spring, like throughout last fall, they did really well. Last winter, they did really well. And then this spring, they did really well too. Because this spring, we didn't have extremely hot weather, which will kind of nuke them and overcook their eggs, kind of a thing. We didn't have a lot of rain. With that rain, jeepers, what happens with rain? Supposedly, from what I've heard, is that if you have too much rain, uh, they can't pick a proper place to nest. The rain either washes it out, or what it actually does is it soaks their eggs in water and essentially rots them. So we didn't have that. We didn't have the high heat that would typically cook them. Even wildfires. We had a couple of good ones, but it wasn't anything. It wasn't a bad year for forest fires. Uh, there was a couple of fires, but nothing nothing overly too extreme when it comes to fires and weather, just in general. And then this summer, when I was out walking around and stuff, uh, it was a little strange because you didn't see them a lot, but I could hear the chickens all over the place, and that was even spring, summer, and getting into the fall, before the season opened up. So I thought for sure we were gonna have a phenomenal chicken year. This podcast is brought to you by Rampage Coffee. At Rampage Coffee, they have all sorts of different kind of blends of coffee. They have some merchandise and rubs as well. For me, my go-to is the C4 blend. It packs one heck of a punch, and it's enough to crank a diesel engine in the morning. And for me, not being much of a coffee guy, I don't like to drink it all day. So 1 or 2 cups of C4 blend, and I am good for the day. If you don't really know which one to get, I would highly suggest one of the bundle kits, and you can customize them so you can try all sorts of different varieties of blends and the size of packs that you want. And you can also get some merchandise in with your coffee kits as well. Also, new for this year, they are now coming in K cups if you have a Keurig. So if you want to check those guys out, head over to rampagecoffee.com. And for you guys listening and watching this, if you use the promo code Buick at checkout, you'll receive 10% off your order. So that's rampagecoffee.com, promo code Buick, and you'll receive 10% off your order. So, over the course of the summer, we haven't had overly too many like real bad rainy days or real hot days. We haven't had any of those real nasty heat domes kind of a thing. And the amount of rain compared to heat that we've been having over the course of the summer has been really good. We've had an extremely good berry year. If you go out into the trees, there was high bush cranberries growing everywhere. I seen Saskatoons growing everywhere. The blueberries were absolutely phenomenal this year. Same with raspberries. Everywhere you went, if there was a raspberry bush, there's a raspberry on it. Some years it's a little too hot where the raspberry bushes itself is just this great big huge blooming green thing, but there's no berries on it at all. And I think that's from it's either too much rain and not enough heat, or too much heat, not enough rain kind of thing. It's one or the other. I can't quite remember. But no, this year the berries were great. And that's why when it came to this fall, what I thought was happening is that come August, mid August, early September is usually when things start to kind of dry up. Uh, we get a little less rain, a little bit more heat, and then a couple of colder nights. So what ends up happening is your berries kind of dry up, they drop off the branches, and then the chickens, they don't have anything to eat when it comes to blueberries. So then they kind of have to work their way towards like the cranberries, and then that's when you get those beautiful cranberry smells, and basically you'll find rough grouse all over the place in like cranberry patches and stuff. And then after that, again in about mid to the end of September, you start to get those frost days, and what that frost does, if it's the first couple of frost, it's actually not too bad. It really sweetens up your berries and makes them taste absolutely delicious. It just pulls all that last little bit of natural sugars out of them, and it's a great time to pick them. But then once you get a couple of those heavy frost, it dries them all out. The rest of them that were on the branches and stuff, they all drop out, and then the chickens essentially don't really have much else to eat other than uh, rose hips and the pretty well the clovers and the alfalfa and grasses that are growing on the roads. And now, when it comes to the way that chickens eat food and how they digest it, they don't really have a stomach. They do and they don't. So when it comes to the berries are soft enough where they can sit there and they can pick it off the branch. It goes into like their first stomach kind of thing, like their craw, and from there it goes into their gizzard, and then their gizzard is what their actual stomach is. And the gizzard is just pretty well two big muscles like this. And the way that the gizzard works is that it's a big muscle, and it squeezes and it grinds all that food up. So when they have something like soft berries in their stomach, they don't really need anything to grind it up. The little bit of seeds and stuff that are in those soft berries, it's enough to grind up that berry, to grind up the skins and stuff like that, and then it's able to go through their system. When it comes to cranberries, same thing. They're nice, soft cranberries. The seeds are even bigger than in the blueberries, so it actually helps them out even more. But then once you get into that late September season, sometimes mid-September, and all the cranberries are kind of pretty well frozen and dropped off, and then they have to switch over to the rose hips and the grasses. Some of the rose hips they can kind of get away with because there's seeds in there as well, but then they have to start getting into like the pea gravels and stuff like that. And then also with that, once all the rose hips are kind of getting chewed up, they'll also eat the rose petals, and then they slowly they start turning towards all the clovers and the alfalfa and the green grasses, and that's when they really, really need that extra help from the pebbles, because that stuff, it's too hard for them to really grind it up, so they have to swallow rocks, and then the rocks go inside their gizzard, and when their gizzard moves around and squeezes and compresses everything, the rocks themselves is what chews up their food because they don't really have much for stomach acid. So and that's when you start to really see the chickens pop off, and they're all over the roads because they have to be there in order to digest their food, and they have to be there because that's the only place where their food is. Where this year, because we've had such a phenomenal year for berries, they haven't had to come out to the roads yet because uh, the bush is just covered in berries. And we haven't had any real cold snaps up until kind of right now around like October. So, and all these berries that are typically frozen and dropped down onto the ground by now are still hanging up and are still in the trees, and so they don't have to search for their food. But now that we're getting into that time of year where things are starting to freeze up, and we are starting to get a little bit of snow and cold and stuff, we should have seen a lot more chickens. But even this week, I want to say about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we started to get cold and we started to get a little bit of frost. But it wasn't up until about this week now, which is pretty well the week of like middle of October, the 15th to 20th, kind of a thing. Now is when we're starting to see the heavy frost. But unfortunately, we're so far into the year that we went from no frost at all, no real cold weather, to all of a sudden it was just like bam, overnight we had heavy frost. The next day it rained, and then the following day after that it snowed and it got cold. And now going into next week, it looks like it's supposed to come back up into the positives again, like that +5-ish weather. So hopefully, with that being said, coming up here in this next week, like October 21st to 31st, kind of a thing, hopefully the snow that we did get and the frost that we did get is enough to kind of freeze everything else that's out there, and everything's going to drop out, and it's going to draw all that last little bit of nutrients out of the clovers. The clover heads, instead of being, reds and purples and stuff, they should be turning black, which will increase the sugars. And then all the berries and stuff, they'll be frozen and dead and gone. So it's going to force them chickens to come out onto the roads. It's going to force them to start eating those grasses, and it's going to force them to start putting them rocks into their gizzards. So my predictions have been a little bit off this year. I figured, right around the end of September, maybe the first week, possibly the second week of October, we would see a massive increase in chickens. But now, just because of weather-wise, I think we're going to see a slight increase. It's a little late, but I would almost be betting jeepers. I would almost be willing to bet money on it that we will see an increase in the chickens here within this next week or two. And depending on where you live, your chicken season might go until the end of October, might go until the end of November. And if it goes into the end of November, you should be sitting pretty good here. For us, I'll just double check this, and I'll let you know what our season is going to. I got everything downloaded onto my phone here, so it's always nice when you're out of service and whatnot, or if you're just doing this here. So our season goes till November 15th. So with that being said, today, as I'm recording this, it's the 20th. So this will be out tomorrow on the 21st. So we basically have 21st, we got 1, 2, 3 weeks-ish. 1, 2, 3, I guess 3.5 weeks, kind of a thing, to get her done. And hopefully, with that being said, this rain and stuff that we've been getting, especially now that we're going from a El Nino winter to a La Nina, the differences in the ocean water. Basically, there's a big blob of basically hot water that was up more, so it was pushing that polar vortex up and over, and it was dropping out, kind of further down the line in Canada, where now it's La Nina, so that warm water is lower, so when the jet stream comes up and drops out a little bit closer to us now, so now we're going to be getting into like those atmospheric rivers, the cold fronts that come in from the Arctic, instead of that hot pocket of air from the ocean pushing it over. It's now going to drop out where it typically does in like British Columbia, like right around the BC Alberta border, Hudson Hope, Fort St. John, Chetwynd, getting over into like Grand Prairie, Grand Cache kind of area is where it's going to be dropping out now. So that being said, November we might see a little bit more rain and snow, and if that happens, well, hopefully the ground is nice and hard and frozen by then, and we just get nice fluffy white snow, not that real wet thick stuff. Because chickens, they're like women with fancy shoes. If it rains and that there's a bunch of mud and stuff on the road, chances are they're not going to want to get them fancy shoes wet and muddy kind of thing. You know what I mean? So yeah, hopefully we get some real cold weather here, and then that just kind of nukes the rest of the berries, drops them out, forces the chickens to come out onto the road, start eating these clovers, get them pebbles into their gut, and hopefully we can start stacking them up. I think this year I want to say I've seen maybe 9, and I think I've shot 6. For a guy like me, that's terrible. Uh, Typically by now I've got at least 20 in the deep freeze, and I've ate, I don't know, 10 or so, maybe sometimes more. But yeah, hopefully it should pick up. If it doesn't, well, sorry, I'm just a guy making a prediction, and yeah. So hopefully here in the next week or two, everything picks up. We're able to go out and get ourselves a couple daily limits of chickens, and get some put into the freezer. But anyways, guys, I think that's it for this one here this week. And hopefully you're able to get out there, get yourself some chickens. And yeah, let me know how you guys make out. And yeah, if you guys have any comments or whatever, just leave me a comment down below. If you like this video, hit like button down the bottom. If you're just listening to this, head over to our YouTube channel if you want to watch it. There's a little video version on our YouTube page called Buick Outdoors. It's on the podcast playlist. Subscribe to the YouTube, and yeah, see you guys on the next one.